Hello, we're at the top of the hexagram. It's the last line of gate 50. Line 6 is called leadership. Every sixth line has the capacity to lead, or not, of course. If you look at all of the 6 lines very carefully, you see that they are of enormous importance to us in our process. The 6th line represents where we're going in our responsibility process. But we know what 6 lines are like. We know that in the first part of their life, they're constantly changing their values because they're living out their 3rd line adaptability. They move from value system to value system until they finally get fed up because they don't know what values are really for them. And this brings up a very important point. You can only know what values are for you when you're living your definition, your type, and your authority. Otherwise, it doesn't work. Your mind can say, I'm against heroin, but then if you're a generator and someone says, hey, do you want to try some of this white powder? I don't know, is it white powder? Anyway, do you want to try some of this? And you go, uh-huh. You have no idea what your values are until you're living your design and until you come up against a way to respond into something. And then you know. If you're establishing your values on the mental plane, you're giving your mind authority over you. Your mind can assemble and research the values that have been established in your life, but it cannot generate them. Values don't belong up there. Only the examination of them belongs up there. For all of us, the value process is very important because it is our link to being able to make our communities operate correctly, operate properly. And for each of us, what is really of value can only be established through living out the nature. And that means that, well, wherever we are in our process, no matter how much experience we've gained in this life, until we enter our process correctly, only then can we actually begin to see what values are real for us. The 6th line of leadership starts off by not being able to recognize that. The 3rd line is going to have a lot of value shifts because it's bonds made and broken. It's part of its design to have the experience of many values. And yet it won't go through value after value for its whole life, not if it's living out its own nature. If it's living out its nature, it will go through a very specific program of changing values. And that's correct for it as part of its movement. Now, it's not the random chaos that would come if it was not living out its own nature. The 6th line of leadership is about getting involved with various different values in one's process, becoming frustrated with all of that because you cannot live by them successfully with others, and going up on the hill or up onto the roof of the house and just sitting there, watching, examining the values of others. Remember that what the 6th line is there to assess are the values that were brought at the moment of crisis, whether they can really be effective for society. It's the 6th line that will decide clearly whether there is consistency in what the 5th line brings as a practical solution. What are the practical values we need now that allow everybody a place? And of course, that's very difficult. The upper trigram is transpersonal. We know this. The 4th and 5th lines know that there's a gate at the other end. They know that there's a 27 there waiting to care. And they know that the 27 will only care if the values are correct. 6th lines have a broader view. They see the whole circuitry, which means that the whole tribal circuit is there for the 50 to look at in the line 6. It's not just simply looking for the values that will bring it proper caring. It's not looking to establish a value that will condition proper caring. It's looking at the whole process. It's looking at the material. It's looking at the pleasure. It's looking at the sex. It's looking at the family and the children, the community. It's going through the whole tribal circuitry. And because the tribe only has one voice, that possessive voice of the 45, which says, I have or I don't have, the laws and the values have to bring value to the tribe in a very material way. The tribe are going to say that we will not tolerate laws that strip us of our security. In the exaltation, we have the gift in a position of power to maintain harmony even in severity. The strength to maintain one's values and vigor and continue to have harmonic relationships with others. The gift in a position of power. This says in a position of power. It's not saying that you are in a position of power. It's not saying you will be ever in a position of power. It's also not saying that you won't be. But if you get into a position of power, then you have a gift. Otherwise, it's not there. If you're above the values, you have the gift. If you are still in the value game, you don't. The sixth line is there to bring us the whole completion of that process. And what they're saying is that values must lead us. And if we're not led by the values, society will crumble. And the values must lead everyone, even if it requires severity. As long as not everyone is willing to accept that, that means automatically that there are going to be victims of that value system. And it's something to understand in the nature of duality. We can all yearn for a transformation that will bring values that can lead the totality so that we don't have these vast divisions. But we also have to see that no matter how wonderful that value structure will be, there will always be those who will resist it and who will be dealt with severely. What comes out of that, whenever there's a shift in the value systems, is that there are those people who are punished for being left behind. It's the human way. It's very much the tribal way. The way that this sixth line operates now in our time is that it always leaves blood on the ground. Metaphorically, at least, it's not literally about people dying. Severity can come in many ways. Verbal severity can be just as brutal and painful as physical severity. Being cancelled on social media can be desperately severe to some people. But when the sixth line transforms, because we're moving towards that evolutionary point, and they are a transitionary line, then the awareness will be guided differently, because we're going to be guided with the addition of a different kind of awareness field, the emotional awareness field. This is when we have the mutation in 2027. In the detriment, an inherent moodiness that in a position of power may at times alienate or offend and affect overall efficiency. The strength to maintain one's values, but at the expense of harmonic relationships. Again, it says in the position of power. These six lines that sit up on the hill, it's better that you ask them what values seem to be consistent and get their advice, rather than try to encourage them to bring their values in as a control mechanism. Because when you go from giving values, when the law becomes the leader, and remember that once the tribe is converted, everything else moves. The moment you give the tribe that leadership, the next step that you're taking is a risk, because we're going into gate 28. The grounding, as always, through gate 3. In the sixth line, it's called surrender. The sixth line can be so wise. Surrender. There's nothing else to do, really. We surrender to the process. We surrender to our strategy and authority. We surrender to the vehicle. We surrender to the values and the leadership. Leadership. Or not, I guess. Always got to be the or not. So the moon moved into gate 31 this morning at 10:10. The throat gate of leading and influence, looking down to gate 7 in the G center. This is a projector channel, which tells us that recognition and invitation is necessary before taking up a leadership role. It has the voice which says, I lead, and yet there's no motor here. So it's not a gate of action, and the words are often just words. Next, we have gate 33 at 20:54. This is the mirror to the 31, the gate of privacy and retreat. And it's in the throat, and it is pointing to the G. But this time we're abstract, not logical like the 31. But it is still a projector channel. Anything you have to share in this collective channel, it needs to be invited out of you, or at least it does if you want anyone to listen to you and take you seriously. You may have heard all kinds of secrets from the harmonic gate 13. Have some awareness around what you're sharing, as well as when you're sharing it and who you're sharing it with. And today we have a double sun transition day, at least here in the UK. We move into gate 28 at 23:36 this evening. So look out for another report later on today. On a 2 sun gate day, I usually post the overview around 8 o'clock and then the first line 30 minutes or so later, and then we spend a few days playing catch up. So gate 50, I hope you have found value in gate 50 and learning about the lines of gate 50, and I look forward to meeting you again in gate 28, gate of the game player, the risk taker and the gambler. Individuality is coming our way, and we'll see you later on for that one. So until then, as always, take care of yourselves and go gently.